When you get to that point where you think it's over, if you can wake up and take a breath in the morning, it is not over. And you are so much closer to having that moment that breaks it all open for you than you realize, and just don't give up, keep going.
In 2007, a 25-year-old aspiring music executive in Atlanta, Georgia, had an idea. Scooter Braun had gone from college dropout to running a record label marketing department in no time, but a quarter-life crisis would find him reassessing his goals and staking out on his own. He had a vision for two artists. One, a young boy with an angelic voice that evoked Jackson 5-era MJ, and another, a rapper who could speak directly to a diverse generation of college kids that Scooter saw as underserved. In a matter of months, he would find both. And over the next 15 years, he would become the most successful manager in music, shepherding the careers of Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and the Kid Laroi, among many, many others. In 2021, he would sell his company, SB Projects, to the Korean multinational Hybe for a whopping $1.1 billion and assume the role of CEO at Hybe America. And it all started with one idea.
How did your parents' professional life inform your ambitions?
It wasn't necessarily their professional life, because my parents never really talked to me about money or business. And my mom was an orthodontist and my dad was a dentist. I think having an independent working mom, she was one of the first females in the country to have her own private practice, informed how I saw partnership, how I saw equality. But what I do is so different than what they do. I mean, they really had the 9 to 5 and then, had emergencies here and there for patients, but the path I chose wasn't school, wasn't a 9 to 5. I wanted to make my own path. My biggest early supporter was my father. He used to come in our room every night before we went into bed and tell us that he held us to a higher standard because we were worth something. And I think over the years, that propaganda that he kept saying to us really worked, because we believed we could achieve things.
I know in high school you played AAU basketball. What do you think is sort of the most lasting, significant things that you learned from youth athletics?
The most lasting thing is the friendships. I have a text chain on my phone, 7 guys from my old AAU team, and we still to this day talk all year long on this text chain, checking up on each other, cracking jokes, and we come together for a weekend every year around March Madness. But what it informed is teamwork. It informed my ability to not judge anything in the first quarter. We were never allowed to celebrate until the game was won. When we played at tournaments, we were never allowed to think, okay, we can beat this team. What about that? We had to treat each thing as the moment. That is what we were going after. And I think that informed a lot of the way I saw business. I could think long term, but I always could address the moment.
Do you consider yourself a competitive person?
Yeah, I think I'm competitive. I think that I compete with myself. I think that there was a point in my life where insecurities played into the role of you're young and you want to compare and you want to see what somebody's doing, you get competitive. But I think I got into a place in my life where I genuinely want to see people succeed. I call it my vacation theory. If everyone's doing well, it means they can pay for their own vacation. So I want everyone to do well, and my competition is who I see in the mirror.
What are the qualities about yourself that you hold on to the most tightly?
A really big one for me is I don't want to ever lose myself. I'm really close with a group of friends of mine who I've had since childhood. And I hold on to those guys really tightly because they know Scott, they know me, and no matter where I go in this world, I have that foundation with them.
So you, like me, are a college dropout.
Yeah.
Obviously, you got a lot out of that experience, just being in Atlanta, being on the party scene and all of these things. When you think about your kids, do you feel like college is an important or a necessary thing for them?
Look, I don't know what college is gonna be like when my kids are that age. What I would say is everyone's path is different, everyone's journey is different. I don't see college as something I'm going to tell my kids they need unless they want to be a lawyer or a doctor, they need certain diplomas. The reason why I want my kids to go to college is because I regret missing out on so much of my youth. There's just something so unique about the community of college if you actually do it that way. The kinship that you have with these people, I realize that that is the beauty of college. And it's an opportunity to grow up socially within that community before you enter the real world. And I had a different type of college because mine was Atlanta. Once I left school, it was really just the city of Atlanta.
While you're in Atlanta, you start your sort of professional career, first selling fake IDs and then promoting some parties. It takes a very particular skill set and hustle to be a successful party promoter. What do you think it is about you that made you so good at that?
I think that I was good at putting myself in other people's shoes. And I find myself in some ways to be extraordinary, but in many ways to be very ordinary. The music that I like is liked by a lot of people, or the type of party and element that I want to create is liked by a lot of people. So by being that ordinary, I kind of had a sense of taste of like what would work for a lot of people. The other skill set I would say is just like a grind. You know, I just had this almost obnoxious work ethic because I just like didn't want to stop. I was so afraid of failure at that point that once I started something, I had to see it through.
Speaking to the fear of failure, I think it's everyone's nightmare to like throw a party and no one show up. What was it that gave you the confidence that I'm gonna put together an event and all these people are gonna come?
I don't think that was fear of failure. I think that was ignorance. My father used to come in our room every single night, like I told you, and he would say, you know, Brauns are different, you boys are special, to me and my brother, and we shared a room. And I think after years and years of hearing that, I just thought, why not me? So I remember I stopped by this club and there's this guy, B.A., his partner is this guy, Kerry, and they had a club called Chaos in Atlanta in Buckhead. And I just was like, hey, if I bring people here next week, would you give me money? Because I'd stopped selling fake IDs and I didn't want to be broke. He was like, yeah, how many people can you bring? And I said, how many people does it hold? He's like, 800. And I was like, yeah, sure. And he looked at me like I was insane. And I didn't know that that was hard. I just thought, why not me? And I printed a bunch of flyers at Kinko's and got a bunch of girls that I was friends with to pass out the flyers with me. Got a DJ who I knew could play really good hip hop and rock and roll, and 800 people showed up. I think once you go from the idea of potential to expectation, that's when you see what people are made out of. I had the potential to throw these parties and the potential started to show. And then there was an expectation, can he do it again? And that's when the fear of failure comes. That's when I was like, well, now I'm doing this and now I'm seen as successful in this. Like, I don't want to fail. Like, I want to make this bigger. I want to make this bigger. And at that point in my life, fear of failure really drove me. It doesn't drive me at all today. But at that point in my life, it was the reason I was getting probably for 10 years, 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night, which was incredibly unhealthy and led me, you know, not living the healthiest lifestyle. But I just was so afraid of dropping the ball. I had dinner with a friend last night, and he and I used to drive around and say, if you let us in the game, man, we're never gonna give it back. And it's Coach K from QC.
That's crazy.
And I was probably 21 years old. This is 20 years ago. And I was just thinking to myself, how crazy this is from like sleeping on the couch and you know, all these different things to being in this position. I just feel really fortunate, really lucky.
After you promote these parties and start meeting people, you end up linking with Jermaine Dupri and working for him for several years. What were the most important things that you learned during that period of sort of apprenticeship?
Jermaine just told me I had more potential. He said, you have more potential than parties. So it was just the belief in me that made a massive difference. I think when someone believes in you and sees that you're more than what you're showing, that can change your life. And then Jermaine exposed me to other things. I had never been to Los Angeles until Jermaine took me. I had never seen that world until Jermaine pulled me into it. And I think the exposure that Jermaine gave me to the upper echelons of success within the music industry made me believe I deserved to be there and I could be there. That's my brother for life. Like, I'm grateful to him beyond, because he saw a kid throwing parties in Atlanta, Georgia, and was like, come with me, I'm gonna show you the rest of this.
Just 20 years old, Braun was promoted to the head of marketing at Jermaine Dupri's So So Def Records. In the years that followed, Scooter would cement his reputation in the music industry as an idea guy, connector, and broker. He would even put together a $12 million Pontiac deal for rapper and friend Ludacris. But in 2007, he was ready to go out on his own, founding a management company, SB Projects, and signing a teenager from Canada, whose name you've likely heard a couple times since.
When you leave working with Jermaine and decide to go out on your own, how did you put the pieces together to even endeavor to do this? And what kind of runway had you built for yourself in order to get SB Projects off the ground?
Yeah, when I left Jermaine, it was a combination of me knowing it was time to go and some things happened that like I had to go. I did like a campaign deal for Ludacris with Cadillac for 2 miles an hour with the Pontiac Solstice. And made a little money from that and a little calling card to say, okay, I can do marketing outside of Jermaine. And it got me little marketing gigs here and there, but I knew like, my brother was backpacking South America, and I always thought backpacking was something kids did to like escape the real world. But I was kind of lost, so I just bought a one-way ticket to Chile. I met him there, and we hit South America, 15-hour bus rides, $5 to $20 a night hostels, like living out of a backpack for a month. And I came back completely rejuvenated, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I had enough money for 13 months before I went broke. And I said, I'm gonna find acts that I believe in that no one else wants, and I'm gonna make that my calling card. I'm gonna find 2 to 3 acts, because Shaka Zulu, Ludacris's manager, was like, if you find one, you're good. Find 2, it's crazy. I wrote down a plan. I said, I'm finding a kid who can rap his ass off, but speaks to all these college kids who doesn't have anybody directly talking to them, and discovered Asher Roth on MySpace. And I had this idea of like, I was a big Michael Jackson fan of the Jackson 5, of this angelic voice singing love songs that made you believe in love again. And Justin fit that mold. And everyone thought I was in Atlanta, was killing it, because I had my apartment and I had this kid living in a little townhouse illegally, and this guy living in like this broken down house 2 minutes away from that, and Asher was babysitting Justin sometimes, and like, it was wild back those days. But I fully believed in these guys, and I risked everything. I was in month 11. I was 25 years old. My dad called me just to check up, see how I'm doing, and I didn't know why. I just broke down crying. And I was like, Dad, I got 2 more months before I'm broke, and no one knows, and these people are depending on me. I got this kid, 13-year-old kid, and his mom, Asher and his buddy, like, this is done. And he was like, look, you haven't listened to me since you were 18 years old. You've come this far. You said you got 2 more months to see it through. And the next day, Asher walked into my apartment and played me I Love College. And that song saved our company. That was this idea that success and failure live next door to each other. And I always remember that, and I hope that helps people know that, like, when you get to that point where you think it's over, if you can wake up and take a breath in the morning, it is not over. And you are so much closer to having that moment that breaks it all open for you than you realize, and just don't give up, keep going. My biggest advantage in my professional life is probably my biggest disadvantage. I think I care too much. I've gotten better about it, but someone who really cares about me once told me that I'm a little too fragile sometimes. I think that's really allowed me to be really good at my job, but I think it's also caused a tremendous amount of frustration at times. But I wouldn't want to be any other way.
When you reflect back on yourself and your own performance in that period, what do you think were the holes in your game as a manager?
I think what made me a really great manager in the beginning of my career was my deep insecurity and my need for others to tell me that I had achieved something, or I had helped them, or I was worthy because they told me I was worthy. I have a wonderful relationship with the artists I work with. It goes in ups and downs, and you live through those ups and downs together, and people become family because of that. I've been fired and rehired twice now. And I think that the last couple years of me rediscovering myself almost allows me to be a worse manager, because I don't have that insatiable need to find that satisfaction outside of myself. But it's made me a much better leader, because I'm comfortable enough to scale and trust other people. That's why I'm not a day-to-day manager anymore, because how I've changed doesn't make me the most suited person to do that job.
With management, it has always struck me that there's a very delicate balancing act that you have to do, because on the one hand, you are there at the request of the talent, and so you are fighting for what is in their best interest, of course, but sometimes what they want and what is in their best interest, or at least what you perceive to be their best interest, are at odds. How do you negotiate that?
I think in the beginning of my career, and this is a mistake probably, I thought I was right. And as long as we had success, I believed that I was justified in what I was doing. And like I said, my father believed in me more than anyone in the world, but he also gave me that pattern, because I don't want to take anything away. This is one of the greatest fathers in the world, but he was doing the best he could with what he had, like all of us do. And as an adult, I realized there's things about the way I was raised that I don't want to do with my children. And he and I had a conversation with certain things that I was like, that wasn't okay. And he looked at me and he said, but it worked. And my response to him at this place in my life was, no, I was great despite it, not because of it, and so were you. Unfortunately, I think sometimes the acts that I worked with, they had ambitions and they had certain things they wanted to do, and I thought, okay, well, I disagree with them and I'm just gonna force the issue, and as long as we're still successful. But if you continue to do that over and over again, that artist doesn't necessarily feel ownership of that success. And I'm much better about that now than I was then. What I definitely know now, and what I've been doing for probably the last 5 to 7 years, has really been saying, this is your journey. I'm here to help facilitate it. I will tell you if I disagree, but it has to be your decision.
In managing artists, you have to be able to be incredibly candid with them and have tough conversations and also private conversations. But we live in a world where anytime anything goes sideways, everything is aired out in public.
Yeah, you have to know your truth. You have to know the people that love you, they know who you are. You have to live in a place of truth. Like, people are gonna tell their story. People might have revisionist history. They just might make up a story. Sometimes you gotta take ownership of your own mistakes, because you're the one who wishes it didn't go down that way because you've learned, but you did. You know, so I would say you can't live your life defined by how someone else is gonna tell your story. You know, because the truth is no one's gonna remember any of us in a couple hundred years. Our impact is the only thing that remains, not necessarily who our names were. So I think 1, don't have an ego about it. 2, don't let someone else define you. 3, have empathy. You know, have empathy that if somebody's doing that, that might have nothing to do with you. You know, and you can choose to react in rage, or you can choose to say, what am I gonna learn from this moment? How do I be better the next time? And then also boundaries. I thought my whole life, people would say, oh, boundaries are there to protect you. And I thought I had to be tough the way I was raised. So I was like, I don't need boundaries. I don't need protecting. And then someone I really respect taught me recently that boundaries are there to help you educate someone else on how you deserve to be treated. And if someone is going to air out laundry constantly with no context, you're allowed to not have them in your life. You're allowed to walk away. I think at this point, actually, I process criticism based on my own resistance to it. If I'm truly resistant to criticism, it's because I haven't settled something in myself and I actually need to run towards that criticism and see why I'm resistant. When I'm indifferent, then I know it has nothing to do with me.
You've had several clients over the course of your career who have had personal troubles. Justin, when he was sort of late teen, Demi, Kanye, and anytime you see a talent going through this, the sort of typical Twitter reaction is like, oh, their team needs to help them. Shouldn't this person be helping? But obviously that is much easier said than done. When you're actually in that situation and you are the manager, how do you think the best way to approach that kind of situation is?
Someone once said to me, they were like, you're a manager, you're not God. Like, why do people think? But I also see the other side of it. I remember watching the Amy Winehouse documentary, and the manager said it wasn't my responsibility to help her, it was my responsibility to get her on stage. And I found that to be absolutely outrageous. I think It's almost if you're dealing with someone who's dealing with addiction and you go to Al-Anon meetings. The only person who's going to turn that addiction around is the person themselves. They have to make a conscious decision. They deserve the credit if they turn it around, and it's on them. Doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility to try and help or be there for that person or be a place they can come back to that's safe. If you're not willing to do that, you should not be on their team. Do I ever doubt myself? Constantly. I have my insecurities, I have my ego, I have, my need for respect or not feeling enough. So yeah, I definitely doubt myself. And sometimes that's helpful and sometimes it's crippling.
In the 5 years since our first conversation, you've enjoyed some incredible highs, but then you've also had both personal challenges and then some professional things like buying Big Machine and getting caught up in a back and forth with Taylor Swift. What do you think it was about that moment in your career that led to this sort of tumultuous period?
Every story has arcs. It has to kind of go up and down. Like you're on the rise, it's great. When you get to a certain point, people are gonna take shots. I just look at it as like, it needed to happen, it was a gift. And I choose to look at it as like these moments that you think someone's attacking you or these moments that you think are unfair. One, you play a role in every one of these moments because you're part of the story. And two, you can choose to be angry, resentful, bitter, and actually become the story in your anger. Or you can choose to say, thank you for playing a role in my growth and move on. And I think this whole process has led me to understanding that that's worth working towards.
Taylor lobbed accusations, but Scooter took the high road, focused on his own business, and turned the page. At the onset of the pandemic, he helped craft a charity single featuring two of his biggest stars. The following year, he would announce a partnership with South Korean hitmaker Bang Si-hyuk. And then, just recently, as CEO of Hybe America, he acquired his old friend Coach K's Quality Control Music in a deal worth $320 million. But while he continued to achieve new professional zeniths, life dealt Scooter an unfortunate personal challenge in the form of a public divorce, leading Scooter to pause, reassess his approach to both parts of his life, and embark on a journey of mindfulness and self-improvement.
You've built this business, you've sold the business, you've exited, you're now still overseeing it. What has the transition been like from, being the sort of captain of your own ship to now being part of this much larger company?
I mean, it's different, but the part of the reason I did it is because Bang didn't want me to not be a captain of my ship. And even the people I'm pursuing now for our company to acquire and bring into our business, they're other entrepreneurs. And my biggest thing to them is he doesn't let me call him anything but partner. He's never interfered with my ship. We work in tandem. If you're gonna join this, you're gonna be a partner. You can build with other entrepreneurs if you respect their fact that they're an entrepreneur. And the chairman, Bang, is a dreamer, he's brilliant, and he respects the entrepreneurial experience because he's an entrepreneur himself. I'll never forget, right before we closed the deal, he and I were doing Zooms every couple days to get to know each other to see if we wanted to do the deal. One day he said to me, the team has a lot more due diligence to do, but I'm gonna close the deal next week. I don't even know if we're gonna have the diligence done. And I was like, what's going on? He said, in the West, you guys always talk about the transaction. How do we get the deal done? How do we get the deal done? But in the East, we talk about what we're gonna do once the deal is done. How are we gonna build together? How are we gonna work together? He goes, in all our Zoom conversations, you never once talked to me about the transaction. You talked to me about music, you talked to me about culture, you talked to me about family, you talked to me about philosophy, you talked to me about fun things that we can do together. Whatever we find in diligence, it doesn't matter because you and I together will deal with it on the other side. And that's why I'm gonna do this deal. And that's a very, very unique partner to have. And that made me, that conversation had me call my guy and say, close the deal, I'm ready, let's do this. How do I know when to pivot? It's a gut feeling. I don't think there are any wrong decisions. I think we're all on this journey and we're learning what we need to learn. So I pivot when I feel like it's the right decision, when life is taking me in that direction.
When you and I were coming up as college students, early professionals, there was a huge premium put on hustle culture. We looked at the guys like Dame Dash and like,
Yeah, sleep when you're dead.
exactly. And we now exist in a world where that is like looked at as an anachronism. And
It's strange, like you'll watch a Powerade commercial and it's like, pause, take time for you. And I'm like, that is not how we grew up.
yes, and so I'm curious, how have you adapted yourself to that? And also, you know, you manage an office with hundreds of employees, many of whom are, you know, young millennials, Gen Z, who put their personal work-life balance at the top of their sort of priority list. How have you adjusted your game for this new sort of environment?
One, it's not even adjusting my game. I've changed. I mean, I wake up every morning and cold plunge and meditate. So I'm kind of evolving in that way too. What I think it is having that balance of there also has to be action, not just a pause. And also, I don't hold on so tight anymore. I used to think it was my responsibility to make sure we're all successful. And now I realized, with the help of some of the young people who used to work for me, having really candid conversations with me about their own ambitions and not thinking it's my responsibility to get them there, I realized that I don't have to carry that weight anymore.
Do you think you could have achieved what you've achieved if you had this sort of...
No. I think that I am in my journey where I'm supposed to be at this point. I had to be that way at 22. I had to be that way at 26. I had to be that way at 31. This is who I am at 41. And being those different versions of me gave me the perspective and the journey to get here. I don't think I would have gotten here without being exactly who I was at that place. But if I stay in that place, if I'm stagnant, if I just refuse to continue evolving, that's on me. And that's not okay with me. I hope to be better at 51 than I am at 41. Do I have a role model whose success I aspire towards? I read a book called The Operator. It was about David Geffen, and I've been very fortunate to have David become a mentor to me at this point in my life. And he hates that book. When I read the book, I saw someone who was incredibly flawed, who's a normal human being, who cared deeply, who had this tremendous amount of success. And he inspired me because I knew I was flawed just like everyone else, but he made me believe I could achieve things by his story.
Something that I sort of struggle with is when I look at my success at Complex, a lot of what drove it was just having like an insatiable desire to win and like working all day, all night, never putting it down. And now I have 2 kids and a wife and a family, and I struggle with sort of the idea of like, can I still operate at the level that I am accustomed to, that I want to, that I aspire towards, and maintain all of this over here and nurture it and recognize that it's obviously, in the end of the day, more important. It seems like from the outside, the last couple of years, you've spent a lot of time and energy sort of figuring that balance out. And what does that look like?
My first tattoo, I was 18 years old. It says family on my wrist. And it's a strange thing for an 18-year-old to tattoo family on their wrist and not be talking about their current family of mom and dad. I was talking about my future family because all I wanted to do was be a family man. And I wanted to show the industry that you could be super successful and be a family man and balance it and everything else. And then I look back and here I put this family on a pedestal, I put this whole thing, and I was doing everything to be an example. But that's actually not being a family man. It's not about a community project. It's about being there for them, and it has nothing to do with everyone else. And it wasn't until the way I saw my family didn't work out, and this idea that I had created wasn't happening the way I wanted, and I lost my marriage, that's when I had to face myself and say, why am I falling apart right now? Because this isn't working. I didn't have any exposure to divorce growing up. I couldn't get my head around it. And I realize now that it had to happen for me to become present. And when you say I'm finding that balance, sometimes it's when you lose something, that's when you really start to say, wait a second, what is important? It's not even a balancing. I now have my priorities in order, because when I have my kids 50% of the time, I know that 50% of the time they might not be with me. So when they're with me, they get 100% of me. And I had to lose something to gain everything. So it's not even to me about finding a balance. It's about finding out what you're not willing to live without. And I'm not willing to live without my time with them. And I'm not willing to be anything less than this version ever again. I'm not willing to go backwards. I'm not willing to be the guy that needed to win all the time. I just won't be that anymore, because that was this thing that I created that I thought everyone else would love me if I did all that. What did I learn from my biggest mistake? Like, I kind of look at it as like, I don't know if there's mistakes. I think there's opportunities to learn. So I don't know if I define the word as a mistake, but I think it's usually a really, really great tool to figure out where I want to go in my life to not feel that way. And I'm sometimes able to do that, and sometimes I feel stuck. And I'm in a constant work in progress of working towards that. I was able to ask Jeff Bezos, what do you want? You know, this is one of the most commercially successful human beings of all time. And he looked at me and he said, I want to evolve. And I thought that was a cheat code. You know, here it is. You don't need $200 billion to start evolving as a person, to evolve in your intimacy, evolve as a father, evolve as a friend. I think the last couple years through COVID, a lot of things changed in my life. And when I couldn't fix certain things, I realized I had to fix myself. And I had to unlearn certain habits and certain traits, and I went on a real deep path of self-work, which I think sometimes people think is a negative thing. They're like, oh, you're in self-work because you're losing it. I wasn't losing it. I just didn't have a clear path anymore. I was confused, and I built such a story for myself as Scooter that I had lost the little kid Scott along the way. What I'm learning is to love my essence, that all the achievements and all that, my friends don't love me for any of that. And that's why I wrote what I wrote. It was the idea like that you're enough, Scott, because you create, at least I did, I created Scooter to be stronger in the world because I deep down growing up didn't think I was enough. Even with all the confidence my dad instilled in me and all the things that happened to me, there was something inside me for other reasons that I didn't think I was enough, so I had to create Scooter. I went on a path to kind of rediscover that and get, you know, go back to my childhood and then discover who I am today and relearn and let things go. I've started to implement more and more of that into my life, and it's been the hardest yet most rewarding journey I've ever had in the last 3 years.
You've talked a lot about how you no longer manifest.
Well, look, let me say this. I didn't say I no longer manifest. I just look at it differently. Okay. I still manifest, but I don't believe that it's just manifestation. I believe that I manifest things and I'm participating in the universe. We do play a role. We can manifest certain things, but when it doesn't go our way, it might be because the universe is saying, that's not the lesson I want you to learn. I need you to learn something else. It's like you can make a play in basketball, and you're definitely the person who made the decision to make that pass. But there's so many other elements going on the court that play a role in what happens in that game. So you're participating in the game. You're not controlling the game. So I think the only action that's wrong is inaction. The reason I say that is like, you actually don't know what you're participating in unless you participate. So I think in those early years, I was throwing myself in the ring. I was allowing myself to see what opportunities could happen for me if I was willing to get in there and try. And I think for people watching this, that's the thing I would encourage them the most. You're sitting there watching this right now, and you know you have some ambition and you have some dream and you've been procrastinating. You're like, I'm gonna get to it tomorrow, and I got my job and I can't do this or I can't do that. And one day you're gonna wake up and say, where did all the time go? You don't know what you're capable of until you give yourself an opportunity to find out. And I think that at a very young age, because of, I don't know, just the way I'm programmed, I was like, why not? Why not me? I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me go. I would see something and I was like, let's go for it. And then the universe either kicked my ass and taught me a lesson I needed to know, or said, hey, here's a reward for participating. You get to keep going. And I think that the only thing that you can do that's wrong is doing nothing. Because even the times you get your ass kicked, that's part of the journey.
What is it that makes you get out of bed every morning and want to keep doing it?
I'm still curious. I think the day I stop and go in a different direction is the day I stop being curious. And I don't know if that's tomorrow, if that's 5 years from now. I know that my curiosity about certain things has changed, and now I'm curious about other things. And as long as I continue to have a platform to be curious that I enjoy, I'll keep doing it. But there will be a day where I take a pause and I say, hey, I'm gonna take the next year off and just see what comes. And kind of what gets me out of bed in the morning is both that curiosity and the fact that my kids are at my bed pretty much around 6:30 saying, Daddy, get up. I know that day will end too one day. And as long as they're willing to come running in that room and hang out with me, I'm gonna keep hanging out with them.